Picture this. A towering alien professor warns that nearly half the class won't survive the semester. The students panic, except for one human in a ridiculous t-shirt who stares at the galaxy's most feared predator and asks, "Can I pet it?" What happens next will rewrite xenobiology textbooks forever. Galactic University's advanced xenobiology course doesn't mess around with gentle introductions or icebreaker activities. On the first day, Professor Crickstall, a hulking arthropoid, with 3 sets of arms, drops the numbers like a fission core into wet sand. 47% mortality rate, she announces, tapping a display that shows last semester's casualties. The thermal vents in her exoskeleton flare crimson for emphasis. 3 students immediately request transfers. A fourth, a gelatinous Slothian named Zephyr, collapses into a puddle of distress. Across the room, Jake Martinez, the only human in the program, adjusts his faded t-shirt and yawns. The shirt reads, "My other ride is your mom," in fluorescent pink galactic standard. Grunk, a battle-scarred Xantharian warrior, keeps glancing between Jake and the emergency exits like he's calculating which one to throw the human through first. Fizz, a nervous energy being from the Delta Rings, keeps shifting molecular states so fast they're leaving after images. Professor Crickstall activates the security protocols with a dramatic flourish of her anterior limbs. 3 separate force fields hum to life around the specimen containment unit. "Every civilization within 50 light-years," she intones, "has a nursery rhyme about what happens when you underestimate a Vorkanian Doom-Stalker." The display screen switches to historical footage. Smoking craters where cities used to be. Emergency broadcasts cut off mid-sentence. A famous last stand where 2 warring factions got eaten back-to-back by the same creature. The classroom smells like ozone and panic. Zephyr's reforming into a shape that suspiciously resembles a barricade. Grunk's mandibles keep clicking combat rhythms against his thorax. Even Fizz has stabilized into a single horrified form, which for them is basically a nervous breakdown. Meanwhile, Jake squints at the containment unit like he's trying to read the terms and conditions on a dating app. Warning glyphs cycle through 17 languages along the specimen chamber's perimeter. The air scrubbers work overtime as 3 different students secrete emergency pheromones. Professor Crickstall begins the safety briefing with the kind of gravitas usually reserved for doomsday cult leaders. Rule 1. Never break eye contact. Rule 2. If it clicks its dorsal plates, pray to whatever gods you've got left. Rule 3. Something in the containment unit moves. It's just a slight shift of mass, the barest suggestion of limbs unfolding in the shadows. But Zephyr fully evaporates for a solid 8 seconds before reconstituting. Grunk assumes what his species calls the martyr's stance, which involves tucking all his soft organs behind armored plating. Fizz starts emitting a high-frequency whine that makes the light fixtures shiver. Jake stands up, not in terror, not even in caution. He steps toward the containment field like someone approaching a suspiciously quiet puppy. The professor's briefing dies mid-syllable. 12 different alarm systems consider activating. The Doom-Stalker's silhouette resolves into something with too many joints and not enough mercy. Then Jake, the idiot, the legend, the only human dumb enough or brilliant enough, says the words that'll get carved into his dorm room wall. Later. "Can I pet it?" The room stops. Even the air recyclers hesitate. Professor Crickstall's thermal vents go ice blue with shock. The Doom-Stalker makes a sound like a tectonic plate yawning. Grunk finally snaps. It ended the 7th expansion war by eating both sides' commanders during peace talks. Jake shrugs. Yeah, but look at its little face. The containment unit's dampeners strain as something massive presses against the inner shielding. Warning. Runes flash urgent scarlet. The Doom-Stalker's forelimb, razor-tipped and still streaked with the residual biosignatures of its last meal, extends toward the force field. Jake reaches back. Later, the security footage will show 12 different species experiencing simultaneous existential crises. Right now, all anyone can process is the human's complete lack of survival instinct as his fingers breach the safety perimeter. The Doom-Stalker's limb hovers, claws that could unzip a starship's hull now twitching with something that isn't murder. Fizz makes a sound like a failing warp drive. It's going to wear his spine as a hat. Instead, the creature's armored plates ripple. A vibration runs through its body, not the infamous killing tremor from the veteran's warnings, but something deeper, lower pitched, almost. Is it purring? Zephyr whispers from inside a desk drawer. Professor Crickstall's mandibles hang slack. Her carefully prepared lecture on predator avoidance techniques scrolls forgotten on the display. Every species in the room just witnessed two impossible things. First contact with a Deathstalker that didn't end in screaming, and the sudden realization that every single safety protocol they've been drilling might be fundamentally wrong. Grunk finally manages words. Human. What in the 9 burning hells? Jake scratches under the Deathstalker's sensory pits, where most sentients assume there were only nerve clusters for detecting fear pheromones, and watches the creature lean into the touch. I grew up with Rottweilers, he says. This guy's basically a big space crab with trauma. The Deathstalker makes another soft rumble that definitely, impossibly sounds pleased. Its claws retract. Its posture, always described in military briefings as pre-strike coiling, relaxes into something that looks suspiciously like a nap position. Professor Crickstall's emergency lesson plan revises itself in real time. Meanwhile, Jake notices something everyone else missed. The Deathstalker's claws, supposedly honed for evisceration, are worn. Professor Crickstall's third set of arms activate the holographic display with a series of sharp, practiced gestures. The projection flickers to life with a classified military footage warning, the kind that usually comes with a retinal scan requirement. Behold, she says, mandibles clicking with grim satisfaction, the only known recording of the 7th Expansion War's final moments. The footage shows 2 heavily armed delegations meeting in a neutral zone. Diplomatic flags from both factions flutter under a blood-red sky. Then the ground between them erupts. What comes out isn't a weapon or an ambush. It's the Deathstalker, its chitinous plates catching the light like oil on broken glass. The recording cuts off exactly 3 seconds later with an audio clip of someone screaming, "It ate the peace accords," before dissolving into static. Grunk's carapace plates rattle, a Xantharian sign of deep respect for mass murder. Fizz has condensed into a dense, horrified sphere hovering 6 inches above their chair. Zephyr's attempting to digest their own emergency stress gland. Jake just frowns at the blurry, paused image. That footage got enhanced? Professor Crickstall's thermal vents flare. Enhanced? Cadet, this is the most analyzed 7 seconds of military intelligence in 3 sectors. Every child knows the rhyme. She switches to a guttural war chant in her native tongue. Rough translation. Beware the beast that ends debates with general stuck between its mandible gates. The Deathstalker in the containment unit shifts slightly, its limbs clicking against the reinforced glass. The protective field generators immediately ramp up their whine, emitting a subsonic pulse designed to disorient predators. Jake's chair creaks as he leans closer. But look at its joints. That's not a pounce stance. It's crouching. The professor doesn't appreciate xenobiological insights from a species that only discovered plasma physics 2 centuries ago. Irrelevant. Observe the dorsal plating. She freezes the footage on a particularly terrifying frame. These interlocking segments allow it to withstand direct hits from orbital strikes. Their digestive enzymes can dissolve neutronium alloy. And as you'll note, she zooms in on the creature's mouth. Those aren't teeth. They're biotic fractal blades that self-sharpen with each bite. Professor Crickstall's emergency glands finally exhaust their chemical reserves. She sits heavily on an anti-grav stool, all 6 hands limp in her lap. The 7th Expansion War ended because 2 armies messed with a construction worker's job site, Jake supplies. The Deathstalker bumps its massive head against his shoulder in agreement, nearly knocking him over. Its bioluminescence shifts to a frequency the scanners identify as affiliative signaling, the same pattern shown by communal hive species during cooperative tasks. Zephyr tentatively offers the creature a nutrient brick from the lab supplies. Instead of devouring them as predicted by wartime accounts, The Deathstalker inspects the offering with precise mandibular movements before depositing it, intact, into a precisely dug hole in the corner. A quick vibrational pulse seals the opening. It's storing rations, Fizz realizes. Not eating, saving. The Deathstalker rumbles again. This time, when it extends a limb toward Grunk, the Xantharian doesn't flinch. He allows one blunted claw to rest against his battle-scarred carapace. The contact lasts exactly 3.4 seconds before the creature withdraws, standard greeting protocol for its species when meeting potential digging partners. Lab monitors display cascading revelations. Those unstoppable feeding frenzies were likely misunderstood caching behaviors during ecological disasters. The infamous bloodlust, described in military reports, matches documented stress responses in terraforming species when separated from their dig sites. Even the Deathstalker's terrifying appearance proves to be perfect adaptation, not for intimidation, but for regulating subsurface temperatures during extended mineral processing. Jake wipes grease from the creature's elbow joint, a spot where lubricating glands had become clogged from years of confinement. The Deathstalker responds by using a single-bladed limb to gently pat his head, leaving no mark beyond mild hair dishevelment. Professor Crickstall's remaining skepticism collapses when the Deathstalker notices her slumped posture and, after a brief hesitation, offers her a perfectly shaped ball of compacted mineral dust. Exactly the stress relief object used by workers in its native tunneling collectives. This changes, Crickstall begins, then trails off as the implications hit. 3 centuries of xenopolitical strategy, countless military budgets, entire planetary defense protocols, all based on what amounts to a cosmic case of mistaken identity. Meanwhile, the Deathstalker has discovered the unattended podium controls. Its claws fly across the interface with surprising delicacy, pulling up schematics of the university's foundation. It points excitedly at a stress fracture in sub-level 3, then back to its own digging implements, antennae quivering with professional concern. The footings near the quantum labs are failing. Grunk translates warrior training unexpectedly useful for reading structural schematics. It wants to fix them? The Deathstalker rumbles its agreement before demonstrating, not with violence, but by carefully excavating a flaw in the lab's own flooring. Its movements are methodical, precise, its claws retracting completely when passing under delicate conduits. Within minutes, it's reinforced the substructure with compacted mineral composites that scanners show exceed standard durability by 400%. Professor Crickstall's emergency glands finally reboot. She activates the intercom with trembling hands. Administration? We need to recall every Deathstalker suppression order issued since contact. Also requisition some industrial terraforming equipment. And possibly a plaque. Jake scratches under the Deathstalker's chin, eliciting a purr-like resonance that makes the surviving light fixtures hum in harmony. Told you he was just bad at making friends. The classroom door whooshes open at precisely the wrong moment, revealing Dean Vorak flanked by 3 armed response teams. Their plasma rifles track immediately onto the scene. A peaceful student-professor group, clustered around a happily rumbling Deathstalker, currently using its weapons-grade claws to repair a loose floor panel. Professor Crickstall takes one look at the Dean's expression and raises a single weary hand. Vorak, before you overreact, have you ever considered that half our security protocols were written by people who failed basic xenobiology? The Deathstalker glances up from its work. It sizes up the tense newcomers for approximately 2 seconds before returning to its repairs, though not before nudging a spare nutrient brick in their direction with one blunted claw tip. A peace offering. Dean Vorak's mandibles hang slack. His security teams exchange glances as their threat scanners emit confused chirps. Somewhere in the administrative wing, 17 different policy alarms start going off simultaneously. Speaking of which, the Deathstalker just discovered the schematics for the university's obsolete sewer system. Its bioluminescence flares, with what can only be described as professional outrage. This isn't over, not by a long shot. Dean Vorak bursts through the lab doors with all the subtlety of a supernova, mandibles flared in what his species calls the imminent disciplinary action posture. 6 security droids hover behind him with enough firepower to glass a small moon. His compound eyes take in the scene that 37 separate emergency alerts claimed was a code Black Predator containment breach. Jake Martinez sits cross-legged on what used to be the reinforced specimen table, scratching under Digger's chitinous jaw like it's a particularly ugly golden retriever. The Deathstalker, no, Digger now apparently, emits a low vibrational purr that makes the diagnostic screens flicker. In the corner, Zephyr carefully pours nutrient gel into a pattern that matches subsurface mineral deposits on the creature's homeworld. Grunk sketches structural calculations on a whiteboard, while Fizz adjusts the room's seismic dampeners to match Digger's comfort frequencies. Professor Crickstall looks up from where she's been helping Digger reinforce the lecture podium's shaky foundation. Ah, Vorak, perfect timing. The new curriculum adjustments require administrative approval. The dean's neural whiskers twitch like malfunctioning tasers. His security team's threat scanners ping uselessly at the scene. Digger's current bioluminescent patterns register as agricultural terraforming assist mode, which isn't even in their threat databases. One droid accidentally locks onto Professor Crickstall's emergency pheromone residue instead, prompting a confused alert about possible pastry chef aggression. Vorak's voice emerges 2 octaves higher than usual. Explain. Digger chooses this moment to demonstrate its legendary military-grade lethality by using a single precision claw to adjust the alignment of a wobbly desk leg. The movement triggers the security system's motion trackers. 6 plasma rifles snap to attention, targeting the creature's central neural cluster. Jake casually leans into the line of fire, still petting Digger. Dean, he says like they're discussing parking permits. I meet our new teaching assistant. Digger here just fixed all the seismic faults in sublevel 3. Turns out he's got 17 separate engineering certifications from the Vorkanian Terraforming Guild. The claim sounds ridiculous until Crickstall projects the evidence. Biometric scans showing Digger's fractal-bladed mouthparts forming perfect mineral compatibility matrices. His claws executing flawless excavation patterns that match licensed planetary restructuring profiles. Those infamous unstoppable rampages from historical records, cross-referenced with geological surveys showing optimal tunneling paths through every recorded incident site. Vorak's hind knees buckle slightly. He grabs a floating diagnostic pad for support, accidentally pulling up Digger's current neurotransmitter readouts. The screen displays activity patterns indistinguishable from a Graxian nursery worker. The mortality rate, 0, Crickstall confirms. She gestures toward Digger, now carefully arranging seating clusters to optimize acoustic harmonics in the lecture space. Turns out our pedagogical approach suffered from incorrect assumptions about learning environments. Grunk steps forward, a Zentharian warrior voluntarily approaching what his people called the Shroud of Eternal Peril for 6 generations. Except now he's holding a star chart marked with optimal mineral extraction sites. Dean, permission to redesign the combat training simulators? The Deathstalker, Digger's terraforming principles suggest more efficient breaching patterns. Vorak's facial chitin develops a noticeable tick. His neural whiskers vibrate at a harmonics frequency that translates roughly to existential career reconsideration. The security droids start recalibrating in confused loops, their threat detection algorithms short-circuiting on Digger's behavior. Profile. One accidentally projects the university's insurance premiums, now plummeting thanks to unexpected infrastructure repairs. One human fingertip makes contact with the Deathstalker's chitinous brow ridge, a surface previously only touched by high-velocity artillery rounds and autopsy tools. The creature's neural clusters immediately flare with bioluminescent patterns that scramble the lab's EEG monitors. Zephyr melts through the floor grate in a panic. Grunk's mandibles lock open mid-click. Fizz achieves quantum superposition out of sheer existential shock. The Deathstalker leans into Jake's hand, not the tentative nudge of a dangerous animal tolerating contact, but the deliberate pressure of a creature starved for it. Those infamous fractal blade mouthparts part slightly, emitting a resonant frequency that makes the lab glassware sing. The containment field's threat sensors short-circuit one by one as they encounter behavioral data that contradicts every parameter in their databases. You're okay, big guy. Jake murmurs. His fingers find the junction between armored plates. The exact spot tactical briefings listed as primary neural nexus terminate immediately if exposed. The Deathstalker's respiration cycles slow to a rhythm the monitors classify as dormancy. Prep for 3 terrifying seconds before rebooting as contentment. Professor Crickstall's diagnostic tablet displays a rapidly escalating series of warnings. This is impossible. Its neurotransmitter profile matches docile herd species. The combat footage, the historical records. Jake scritches behind the Deathstalker's tertiary antenna. The creature's entire body vibrates with a purr-like resonance that shatters 3 light fixtures. Ever think maybe you've all been reading him wrong? The Deathstalker chooses this moment to demonstrate its legendary killing prowess by carefully using its smallest claw to hook Jake's dangling backpack strap and pull him closer. The gesture is almost protective. Its bioluminescence shifts from battle red to a pulsating indigo that the color charts have to invent a new classification for. In the stunned silence, Grunk's combat hormones finally crash. We've been evacuating entire systems because of, he gestures weakly at the Deathstalker now nuzzling Jake's elbow. Diggers, Jake says, tracing the calloused pads on the creature's lower limbs. Not fighters. Look at the wear patterns. He lifts one of the terrifying claws everyone's been avoiding for centuries. The edge that could slice through starship plating is rounded from constant contact with stone. These aren't weapons, they're shovels. The Deathstalker makes an approving chitter and proceeds to demonstrate, not by gutting anyone, but by delicately excavating a chunk of reinforced flooring like it's tending a garden. Sparks fly where claws meet permacrete. The creature pauses, then nudges the debris toward Jake with the tip of one appendage. A gift. Professor Crickstall's emergency glands have completely exhausted their chemical reserves. She grips the lectern for support as her neural whiskers process the implications. All this time, we've been looking at predator physiology when we should have been studying construction workers, Jake finishes. The Deathstalker rumbles in agreement, its bioluminescence cycling through colors never before associated with its species. Outside the lab, 17 different security teams brace for carnage that isn't coming. The containment field's alarms give one final exhausted beep before switching to standby mode. The Dean's emergency alert panel updates with a new notification from Advanced Xenobiology. Specimen containment nominal. Mortality rate, 0%. Requesting petting supplies. The Deathstalker's jaw creaks open under Jake's gentle pressure, an action that historically preceded mass casualties. But instead of the razor-sharp killing implements described in military briefings, Jake reveals rows of flattened molars worn smooth from constant grinding. They're not weapons. They're geological tools. See these striations? Jake runs a finger along the worn surfaces. The Deathstalker holds perfectly still, its respiratory vents cycling slower than Professor Crickstall's emergency glands can process. These aren't for tearing flesh, they're designed for crushing silicate rock. Grunk's carapace plates rattle in disbelief. He edges closer, his warrior instincts warring with academic curiosity. The Deathstalker tracks his movement but makes no aggressive gesture, just a slight rotation of its mandibular joint that, viewed without panic, looks more like a yawn than a threat display. Crickstall's third set of arms twitch toward the emergency protocols. Martinez, the 7th expansion war archives clearly show what terrified soldiers saw during an orbital bombardment. Jake interrupts. He lifts one of the creature's massive limbs, ignoring the gasps from classmates. The infamous scythe. Claws angle inward instead of outward. Perfect for excavating, terrible for slashing. The tips show uniform wear patterns. These aren't combat adaptations. They're digging implements. Notice how the wear matches sediment abrasion, not armor. Penetration? The lab scanners confirm it before Crickstall can protest. Biomechanical analysis shows the Deathstalker's entire physiology optimized for geological restructuring, not predation. Those unstoppable killing sprees from the war records? Likely panic-induced misunderstandings of a creature trying to tunnel to safety during artillery barrages. Zephyr reconstitutes near Jake's elbow, cautiously extending a pseudopod to examine the Deathstalker's claw. The creature remains motionless except for a slight adjustment to accommodate the Slothian's investigation. The joint articulation, Zephyr murmurs, their bioluminescence flickering with realization. It's all wrong for combat maneuvers. These are meant for steady, repetitive motion. Professor Crickstall's neural whiskers vibrate at a frequency that denotes extreme cognitive dissonance. She pulls up the famous security footage of the Deathstalker attacking peace negotiators. Viewed without panic, the creature wasn't charging, it was burrowing toward the only structurally sound bunker during an artillery strike. The victims had coincidentally been standing right above it. You're suggesting, Crickstall says slowly, that 3 centuries of military doctrine are based on a really bad first impression, Jake finishes. The Deathstalker chooses this moment to demonstrate its legendary killing stroke by delicately using a single claw to scratch an itch behind its own antenna cluster. The movement looks downright clumsy compared to predator species. Fizz hovers near the creature's dorsal ridge, their energy form analyzing bioluminescent patterns. These aren't threat displays, they announce. They're structural integrity readouts. The red pulses correspond to seismic activity in its native environment. The Deathstalker rumbles in apparent agreement, a sound that military archives classified as a pre-combat vocalization. In reality, it's a contented vibrational frequency that helps compact loose soil. When Jake scritches a particular spot, between its armor plates the creature amplifies the vibration until lab equipment starts dancing across tables. Grunk's combat hormones crash completely. He sits cross-legged on the floor, warrior instincts giving way to bewildered fascination. All those evac protocols, the orbital strikes on their nesting grounds. Jake nods, still petting the Deathstalker like it's an oversized labradoodle. The creature's fractal blade mouthparts separate slightly, not in a snarl but in what xenolinguists will later confirm is its species equivalent of a dopey grin. Meet the galaxy's most misunderstood landscaper. The containment field's diagnostic screen updates in real time. Threat assessment algorithms struggle with the new data before defaulting to a blinking error message. The Deathstalker's neurological scans now resemble those of domesticated Graxian tunnel beasts more than any known predator. Professor Crickstall caught Jake napping against Digger's dorsal plates during a mineralogy lecture. Instead of issuing reprimands, she adjusted the lighting to accommodate what xenozoologists were calling interspecies sleep synchronization behavior. The scene would later appear in recruitment brochures, human student and Deathstalker teaching assistant snoring gently, while surrounded by hovering data pads, their respiration cycles perfectly matched. University maintenance droids developed what technicians called professional envy. They trailed Digger on repair routes, recording his methods. The creature's legendary killing claws reshaped warped door frames with museum conservator delicacy. His seismic purr realigned misaligned. Gravity generators better than calibration tools. Soon the droids began mimicking his techniques, though none could replicate his signature move of leaving perfectly compacted mineral sculptures at completed work sites. Dean Vorak's morning briefings now included infrastructure updates instead of casualty reports. The administrative wing's structural integrity scores climbed 12% in as many days. Insurance actuaries kept calling to confirm their scanners weren't malfunctioning. The building's hazard ratings had somehow improved during active use. Vorak took to carrying nutrient bricks in his robe pockets, just in case. Galactic News Network dispatched a crew to investigate the rumors. Their cameras captured Digger gently herding stray first years away from unstable masonry, using the same movement patterns once attributed to herding behavior prior to mass feeding events. The footage aired alongside interviews with stunned military historians. One retired admiral stared at the screen, muttering, "We glassed 3 planets for construction workers?" Meanwhile, the syllabus expanded in unexpected directions. Geology merged with xenobiology. Structural engineering became mandatory. The fearsome specimen containment unit became Digger's office, a space he'd thoughtfully reinforced and soundproofed for student consultations. His claws now handled delicate, tissue samples with steadier precision than any robotic arm. Class projects took on practical applications. When the dean complained about slow repair timelines, students and Digger collaborated on redesigning the university's entire subsurface infrastructure over a single weekend. Visiting professors from the engineering department stood slack-jawed, as undergrads directed a happily rumbling Deathstalker through precision demolition work. The resulting tunnels incorporated mineral reinforcements that scanners showed would last millennia. Former students started returning, not with trauma claims, but with job offers. Construction conglomerates sought graduates experienced in Vorkanian, integrated worksite techniques. War veterans arrived hoping to reconcile with the creatures they'd fought. One grizzled commander broke into tears when Digger, recognizing their old regimental insignia, presented them with a perfectly crafted scale model of their homeworld's besieged capital, complete with annotated structural weaknesses. The course catalog quietly changed. Advanced Xenobiology, Survival Strategies became Advanced Xenobiology, Cooperative Ecosystems. Applications poured in from 17 systems. Wait lists stretched semesters. The admissions office created a special lottery system, while Digger thoughtfully expanded the lecture hall to accommodate 30% more seats without compromising structural integrity. Bizarrely, students from traditionally rival species found themselves collaborating seamlessly. A Tolarian energy being and Zentarian warrior might brawl elsewhere on campus, but in Lab 17, they worked shoulder to carapace calibrating mineral scanners. The university's conflict resolution department began sending their toughest cases to observe Digger's teaching methods, center of attention in a room full of potential prey species, utterly at ease. Even the cafeteria adapted. Vorkanian nutrient supplements appeared beside the coffee dispensers. Food replicators added Digger-approved compaction settings. Students snacked on mineral-rich bricks that, to everyone's surprise, tasted halfway decent when properly seasoned. The culinary department chair called it the most unexpected fusion cuisine breakthrough since edible magma. Lab safety protocols were the last holdouts. The automated warning still blared predator alert whenever Digger accessed maintenance shafts. One particularly dated system kept suggesting evacuation routes whenever he purred. The techs finally solved it by jury-rigging the alarm to announce civil engineering in progress instead. It proved so popular the phrase started appearing on student merch. Professor Crickstall's tenure review board struggled with the curricular changes. They'd never evaluated pedagogy that reduced campus maintenance costs by 40%. When pressed for traditional metrics, she projected Digger's infrastructure improvements against the university's operating budget. The board granted her permanent emeritus status before she finished the slideshow. Midterms became a spectacle. Instead of written exams, students demonstrated practical applications of interspecies collaboration, repairing structures, analyzing geological samples, even choreographing vibrational work harmonies. Digger proctored with attentive clicks and rumbles, his bioscanners providing real-time performance analytics no bubbled test sheet could match. Parents visiting during open house events needed reassurances. The towering Deathstalker assisting their offspring with field calculations bore little resemblance to the nightmare creature from historical archives. More than one set of guardians left having pet what their government still classified as a WMD, an experience that did wonders for interstellar relations. By semester's end, the university's insurance premiums dropped so low, the finance office thought their systems had glitched. Maintenance backlogs disappeared. The geology department gained 17 new research grants, and every single student who'd started the term passed, a first in the course's bloody history. The registrar's office printed new diplomas with an unexpected minor, cooperative planetary restructuring. Graduates found themselves headhunted by mining guilds, disaster relief agencies, and oddly enough, several diplomatic corps. The first interplanetary labor union for Vorkanian terraformers cited the syllabus in their founding charter. The first rule of first contact is also the easiest: to screw up. Don't assume they want to eat you. Jake didn't follow any of the approved protocols when facing the Deathstalker. Didn't assume aggression. Didn't mirror threat postures. just stood there in his dumb t-shirt treating an apex war ender like a strayed dog behind a diner. Step 1 sounds obvious after the fact. Approach with respect, not fear. The hard part is untangling centuries of bad first impressions. Every species in that classroom had generations of horror stories woven into their DNA. The Xantharians' combat hymns warned about Deathstalker ambushes. Slothian nursery rhymes described them boiling oceans. Even Professor Crickstall's people had evacuation drills keyed to that specific bioluminescent pattern Digger used when excited. Jake's notebook from that first class survives in the university archives. Page 1 reads, "If it hasn't killed you, yet maybe it's not planning to." Underlined 3 times, followed by, "Bring snacks." The second step required actual observation. While everyone else saw unstoppable predation, Jake noticed details. The flattened teeth good for grinding stone, not flesh. The claws angled for digging, not slashing. The vibrations everyone interpreted as kill feeds were actually terraforming, harmonics. 3 centuries of military briefings had documented a creature's capabilities without ever considering its intentions. Stress does funny things to behavior. Digger wasn't violent. He was a civil engineer trapped in an endless job. Site inspection with idiots shooting at him. Imagine a construction worker trying to finish a bridge while armies napalm the riverbanks, then getting labeled a war criminal for dropping some choice orbital-grade swear words. Jake proved step 2 by accident when he tossed Digger that nutrient brick instead of running. The creature's reaction, careful storage, not consumption, rewrote 300 years of xenobiology in 4 seconds. Turns out the infamous feeding frenzies were emergency ration caching during wartime supply shortages. Military scans had misread the behavior because, well, when your only cultural reference for bladed limbs is combat, everything looks like an execution. Step 3 should have gotten Jake laughed out of academia. It's the sort of thing toddler education holovids teach. See if they want to be friends. The galaxy built entire diplomatic corps around this concept being naive. 5 interstellar wars started because someone misread a trade negotiation as a prelude to invasion. Professor Crickstall, Vorak manages, your end-of-semester review specifically cited the 47% mortality rate as a positive learning outcome. Digger rumbles softly, not aggression, but terraformer speak for subsurface anomaly. Detected. His claws extend toward Vorak. The security team finally finds something their protocols cover and locks weapons, just as Digger uses those legendary killing implements to fix the wobble in the Dean's left anti-grav boot stabilizer. Jake tosses Vorak a nutrient brick. Toss him that. It's how they say hello. The Dean barely catches it. Digger's ocular clusters track the movement with what military analysts would call target acquisition focus. Vorak hesitates before rolling the brick across the floor, exactly like one wouldn't feed an unstoppable killing machine. Digger intercepts it mid-roll with surprising delicacy, bladed limbs moving with the precision of a master craftsman. Then he does the unthinkable. He stores it, not devours, not weaponizes. Carefully tucks the nutrient brick into a newly excavated alcove near the heating vents, a behavior the scanners now recognize as standard ration preservation among communal tunneling species. Fizz floats closer to the stunned Dean. We've established his species aren't predators. They're subterranean civil engineers with extreme workplace loyalty issues. A hologram displays the translated Vorkanian Guild Handbook, page 347, explicitly forbidding lethal responses to unauthorized surface disruptions, unless properly documented. Vorak stares at the warning signs plastered across Digger's former containment unit. 6 generations of security upgrades, enough suppression tech to pacify a small rebellion, all keyed to the wrong behavioral triggers. The creature they'd been treating as a malevolent force of nature currently hums contentedly, while using seismic stabilizers to reinforce the sagging ceiling trusses. The 7th Expansion War. Vorak begins. Zephyr bubbles enthusiastically. Turns out both sides bombed an active terraforming site during nesting season. Digger wasn't attacking armies. He was evacuating construction materials. Digger chitters, in agreement while simultaneously fixing 3 separate building code violations in the lab's flooring substrate. His infamous blood rage bioluminescence now pulses in steady patterns matching licensed excavation safety beacons. Vorak's communicator pings, the university architect reporting unsolicited but extremely competent structural reinforcements, occurring across all academic wings. The accompanying scan shows Digger's distinct mineral signature in every repair. Jake hands the dean a datapad displaying the new syllabus. Advanced Xenobiology now includes modules on interspecies civil engineering and nonviolent first contact protocols. The mortality rate column reads 0 in cheerful green letters. We're keeping the danger warnings, Crickstall adds, watching Digger gently relocate an anxious Slothian student away from unstable flooring. Just recalibrating what constitutes actual danger. Digger rumbles approvingly and returns to his task, not as the galaxy's most feared predator, but as an overqualified teaching assistant making up for centuries of professional misunderstanding. In the hallway outside, 3 Vorkanian exchange students peek in cautiously. Their bioluminescent patterns flicker through shock, confusion, then dawning recognition, as Digger responds with precise guild-certified signals. Vorak exhales through his spiracles. His mandibles attempt several replies before settling on, "The board will need documentation." Digger immediately projects a holographic terraforming certification badge from his ocular clusters, conveniently updated to include Galactic University's accreditation. The accompanying forms list his emergency contact as Jake Martinez, with a note specifying, for snack emergencies and unauthorized demolition requests. The security droids power down in defeat. Vorak eyes the happy cluster of former predator and prey species now collaborating on structural load calculations. Somewhere in the administrative wing, 17 different policy alarms switch from red to green in perfect unison. The university's insurance AI spontaneously awards everyone hazard pay bonuses for unprecedented risk reduction. Professor Crickstall pats Digger's newly polished dorsal plate. "Shall we address Sub-Level 5's foundation issues before lunch?" The creature that once struck terror across star systems responds by carefully adjusting his safety harness, an item no one had previously realized he needed, and leading the class toward the maintenance tunnels. His gait still registers as lethal predator stalk on the scanners, but now everyone knows better. Vorak stays behind just long enough to witness Jake demonstrate human terraforming techniques, which involve kicking loose floor tiles to test structural integrity while chewing gum. Digger watches with what the scanners tentatively classify as professional amusement. The dean's communicator dings again, interstellar news feeds picking up rumors about radical interspecies collaboration breakthroughs. Attached is a financial report. Applications for interspecies programs just spiked 4,900%, with all new applicants specifically requesting the human-taught classes. Vorak stares at the numbers, then at Digger, then at Jake. "This changes everything," he says weakly. Jake grins and tosses Digger another nutrient brick. The Deathstalker catches it midair with flawless precision. Not to kill, but to store. Nay. Sub-Level 5. Ceiling supports begin spontaneously reinforcing themselves as word spreads. The galaxy's deadliest classroom is officially open for business, and business is booming. Advanced Xenobiology Lab 17 underwent renovations no architect could have anticipated. The reinforced specimen tables became workstations with custom-dug, ergonomic trenches. The panic buttons now summoned Digger for structural consultations. What was once the galaxy's most feared classroom had become something far stranger, a cross between a terraforming workshop and the universe's most unusual petting zoo. Digger took to teaching duties with the same precision he applied to tunnel ventilation systems. His infamous bladed limbs handled delicate instruments with surprising finesse, passing students tools before they realized they needed them. When Zephyr dropped a hydrospanner, Digger intercepted it mid-air with a movement that used to make entire platoons wet themselves. The tool landed unharmed on an anti-grav cushion the Deathstalker had crafted from repurposed containment field components. Professor Crickstall's lesson plans underwent radical revisions. Where once she'd demonstrated predator avoidance techniques using holographic simulations, She now supervised live demonstrations of mineral composition analysis, with Digger's fractal-bladed mouthparts sorting silicate samples more efficiently than any lab equipment. The emergency response chapter became infrastructure assessment protocols, featuring Digger's celebrated ability to detect structural weaknesses by simply humming at floor panels. Zephyr composed vibrational work songs in Digger's native resonance range. The Slothian's gelatinous form pulsed in time as the Deathstalker reinforced ceiling supports, their duets leaving perfect crystalline patterns in freshly laid substrate. Where military scanners once registered only lethal biosignatures, musicologists now identified complex rhythmic structures matching traditional Vorkanian mining chants. Grunk applied his warrior's analytical skills to efficiency metrics. His calculations proved Digger's tunneling patterns followed precise mathematical principles. The same chaotic rampages that once sent militaries running actually represented optimized planetary restructuring models. The Xantharians' combat simulations got rewritten to incorporate terraforming principles, much to the confusion of visiting cadets who expected battle scenarios. Fizz's energy waves stabilized into precise harmonic frequencies that helped Digger map subsurface geology. The being who once vibrated apart from stress now conducted symphonies of resonant data, their form pulsing alongside Digger's bioluminescent nodes. Together, they diagnosed 15 previously unknown stress fractures in the university's foundations. Before lunch, potential students lined the hallway outside, peering through reinforced observation windows. The creature whose image once adorned danger immediate evacuation posters now had fan clubs. 3 Vorkanian exchange students pressed identification badges against the scanners, guild-certified terraformers hoping to audit the class. Their arrival triggered an unexpected reunion. Digger's bioluminescence flared in precise guild greeting patterns none had seen since the war. Yet when Jake extended his hand toward that containment field, he wasn't following protocol. He was testing a hunch that the most feared creature in 4 sectors might just be lonely. The purr-like resonance that followed sent shockwaves through xenopsychology departments across known space. Turns out Deathstalkers aren't solitary hunters. They're communal terraformers who hum work songs while realigning continental plates. The steps seem laughably simple in retrospect. Don't assume hostility. 2. Learn actual needs. Try friendship. The revolution wasn't in the steps themselves, but in applying them to something everyone knew was a monster. Diplomatic envoys from 17 systems requested the lecture recordings. The interspecies A Council reprinted Jake's notebook scans as emergency briefings. 3 different militaries recalled active suppression orders mid-deployment after discovering their targets were just stressed infrastructure specialists. Digger became the poster child for misunderstood civilizations. His ability to fix unstable structures while purring demolished entire academic disciplines built around predator-prey dynamics. The first interspecies construction union formed with a Deathstalker foreman running quality control. Jake's actual class presentation lasted 7 minutes and consisted mainly of shrugging. "Look at any war in history," he said while Digger reinforced the lecture podium behind him. Turns out most aggressors were just people who really needed someone to stop shooting at them for 5 minutes and listen. The simplicity drove traditionalists insane. They pointed to the mountains of data proving Deathstalker lethality. Jake just displayed Digger's civil engineering certifications, earned pre-war, back when his species terraformed resort worlds instead of eating generals. The veterans who'd fought them nodded slowly as decades of attacks suddenly mapped to logical defensive positions around work sites. Galactic University's famed xenolinguists had a collective breakdown when they realized the Deathstalker's infamous wartime transmissions weren't battle cries but union negotiations. That blood-curdling shriek from the Battle of Typhon Fifth, a very frustrated foreman attempting to file an OSHA complaint through gunfire. Practical applications emerged fast. The Voltani's mineral crisis resolved when someone thought to ask the supposedly territorial crystal rippers what they actually wanted. Turns out they weren't guarding deposits. They were stress polishing imperfections out of grief for their collapsing ecosystem. Provide supplemental nutrition and they'll happily share. On a smaller scale, Digger's fan mail outpaced the university's communications grid. Children sent drawings of friendly Deathstalkers building playgrounds. Construction firms requested his vibration patterns for structural diagnostics. 6 separate documentaries chronicled his classroom's transformation from survival training to interspecies collaboration lab. The steps scaled surprisingly well. Tentacled horrors from the methane depths just needed adjustable pressure zones. Energy beings flickering ominously in reactor cores required specific harmonic stabilization. Even traditional predator species responded better to clear boundary negotiations than suppression fields. Jake refused all interview requests until Dean Vorak promised free cafeteria access. His entire explanation? Turns out most things aren't actively trying to murder you if you don't corner them first. Digger punctuated the statement by fixing the leaky hydration dispenser with one precise claw adjustment. Of course, old habits die hard. Visiting admirals still flinched when Digger hummed near unstable architecture. Some diplomats couldn't shake the urge to activate force fields during trade talks. But the data spoke for itself. Interstellar conflict rates dropped 18% in the first cycle after Jake's methods went public. The real test came when war nearly broke out between the Xantharians and Talarian energy collectives over a disputed asteroid belt. Jake and Digger arrived unarmed, unless you count nutrient bricks and mineral scanners as weapons. 3 hours later, both factions were collaborating on sustainable extraction methods while Digger stabilized the bigger planetoids. Traditionalists called it a fluke. Then it kept working. Mining disputes transformed into shared engineering projects. Border skirmishes became collaborative defense grids. Even long-standing blood feuds paused when someone realized the ancestral battleground was actually a failed terraforming project waiting for proper drainage. Dean Vorak framed Jake's original handwritten steps behind blast-proof glass. Don't. Assume 2. Learn needs 3. Try friends, the simplicity still offends certain academics. Military historians particularly hate how it renders their life's work slightly ridiculous. But the construction crews painting Digger's likeness on their orbital platforms don't mind. Neither do the trillions now living in jointly engineered habitats. Somewhere in the administrative archives, there's a photo from that first semester. Jake's fast asleep against Digger's armored flank, snoring in time with the Deathstalker's seismic purr. The caption reads, "Advanced Xenobiology Final. Exam in progress." The galaxy noticed. Dean Vorak's office looked like the aftermath of an interstellar peace accord, crossed with a particularly enthusiastic job fair. Piled on his desk were 17 different petitions, not complaints for once, but requests from faculty across the galactic arm. Biology wanted more humans. Engineering needed them. Even the quantum ethics department had scrawled, "Send us the t-shirt people in urgent red holograph." The dean sighed and extended the human exchange pilot program before the ink could dry on his second coffee. The paperwork barely had time to process before the first transports arrived. Not just students this time, entire families, misfits, and what appeared to be several retired motorcycle mechanics. Humans proved unsettlingly adaptable. Where most species required months of environmental acclimation, humans would stroll through 4 different atmospheric compositions in a morning and complain only about the lack of decent coffee. Their children treated xenocultural training like an all-you-can-eat buffet, mastering alien social protocols between lunch and nap time. Jake's classroom became ground zero for what the administrators cautiously termed interspecies re-education. Other professors initially resisted, until they saw test scores from mixed species groups with at least one human mediator. That ridiculous 3-step method kept resolving conflicts nobody else could untangle. The infamous Tarkilian sibling. Rivalry dissolved when a human exchange student pointed out their territorial displays perfectly matched ancient cooperative hunting patterns. The Benthar flame wars ended after someone demonstrated their death threats were actually poorly translated theater criticism. Applications for the human dormitories outpaced housing allocations 3-to-1. Species who'd avoided each other for generations suddenly requested roommates, but only if a human could be placed between them. The university's conflict resolution AI started sending recommendation letters to every incoming human, though none ever understood why they kept getting free meal vouchers and mediation training manuals with their orientation packets. Off-world governments took notice. The Tolarian Energy Collective issued formal requests for at least 12 humans, preferably with construction experience. The Xantharian War College restructured its entire diplomatic track around what they called Martinez principles, much to Jake's embarrassment. Even the notoriously isolationist Veln hierarchy grudgingly admitted 5 human cultural liaisons after witnessing Digger and a former battlefield adversary collaborate on an orbital habitat retrofit. Back on campus, the effects multiplied. Cafeterias became impromptu negotiation centers where humans facilitated trades between species who'd previously communicated only through security glass. A human barista inadvertently brokered a minerals treaty between the Slothian Mining Guild and Xantharian Metallurgic Consortium over properly frothed nutrient lattes. The anthropology department had collective breakdowns trying to document all the emerging hybrid customs, like the now universal practice of tapping claws or pseudopods twice against reinforced surfaces to echo Digger's structural assessment technique. Academic publishing collapsed into joyful chaos. Peer-reviewed journals retracted centuries of xenopsychology studies after humans kept demonstrating flawed methodology. You only observe them during wartime? Ever think maybe that skewed results? The galactic historical record underwent mass revisions as human students. Often history majors from comparatively short-lived species kept noticing inconsistencies everyone else had taken for granted. Military archives proved particularly vulnerable when examined by humans with genealogy software and too much free time. The exchange program's real test came during 5th cycle interspecies games, traditionally Galactic University's most violently competitive event. That year, human participants triggered 17 different sportsmanship clauses nobody realized existed, not by winning but by teaching competitors to share equipment and revise scoring metrics. The Xantharian wrestling team placed second, but won unprecedented sponsorship deals after a human film student documented their grappling techniques' structural similarity to asteroid stabilization methods. Down in Sublevel 5, Digger's Mineralogical Preservation Society became the most sought-after extracurricular, surpassing even zero-gravity combat training. Students lined up for the chance to assist with infrastructure projects, analyzing stress factors while the Deathstalker hummed scale models into existence. His bioluminescent patterns now featured in first-year orientation materials as examples of nonverbal collaborative communication, much to the amusement of veterans who remembered when those same flickers sent fleets scrambling to battle stations. Human families proved unexpectedly useful as diplomatic intermediaries. Their children treated complex interspecies politics like playground disputes, applying simple fairness principles that left professional ambassadors scratching their heads. One famous incident involved a 6-year-old human explaining trade tariffs to a Veln oligarch using building blocks and candied silicate shards. The agreement they brokered still holds 3 fiscal cycles later. The engineering faculty started calling it the Martinez effect, humans' uncanny ability to bypass centuries of protocol and get straight to practical solutions. When the quantum physics lab couldn't align their containment fields, a human janitor with no formal training pointed out they were using the wrong harmonic intervals, a technique he'd learned tuning pianos back on Earth. The solution worked perfectly, and suddenly every research department wanted at least one human on staff, regardless of credentials. Medical sciences underwent similar upheavals. Human interns kept noticing emotional factors and physiological responses that purely biochemical models had missed. A classic case involved a Slothian patient whose chronic instability cleared up entirely after a human nurse practitioner asked about childhood nutrition instead of immediately prescribing stabilizers. The resulting dietary adjustments are now standard treatment across 7 systems. Market economics weren't immune either. Human traders kept identifying arbitrage opportunities everyone else missed, not through complex algorithms, but by recognizing which species' aesthetics made certain goods valuable across cultural lines. A single shipment of Terran toy kaleidoscopes inadvertently stabilized the Xantharian gem market when artisans realized the color patterns perfectly complemented their traditional armor designs. Dean Vorak watched his institution transform. Where once the hallways had buzzed with tension between rival factions, now they hummed with collaboration. The maintenance budget shrank as students of all species voluntarily repaired infrastructure alongside Digger. Endowment funds ballooned from unexpected donations. Mining guilds, construction alliances, even former military rivals investing in what they called Martinez Method training centers. The program extension paperwork made history. Vorak didn't just approve continued human exchanges. He institutionalized them as mandatory components of every degree track. Reciprocal programs sprang up on Earth, though with less fanfare. Honestly, one human student remarked after visiting the Zentarian exchange campus, "Y'all put way more thought into this than we ever did." Applications from human candidates skyrocketed once galactic media picked up the story. Artists, therapists, mechanics, professions most civilizations kept segregated suddenly became hot commodities when paired with human adaptability. The exchange program's original goal of cultural understanding had morphed into something nobody could have predicted, but everyone seemed to need. On graduation day, as the first mixed-species cohort received diplomas bearing the new Cooperative Studies seal, Dean Vorak found himself shaking hands with parents from 17 different homeworlds. A human toddler slept peacefully against a Zentarian warrior's carapace. Slothian and Tolarian scholars debated mineral harmonics over drinks that wouldn't have been served together 2 cycles prior, and Digger, once the most feared creature in known space, presided over the structural integrity of the temporary stage with all the solemn pride of a master craftsman. The real twist came in the alumni surveys. Human participants reported feeling they'd learned less about aliens than about themselves. "Turns out," one wrote, "we're not special, just really bad at assuming everyone else plays by our rules." The comment sparked 7 new research initiatives and at least 3 religious movements. Back in advanced xenobiology, Professor Crickstall no longer bothered with survival statistics. Her syllabus now opened with a simple question: what else have we gotten catastrophically wrong? The mortality rate stayed at 0. Applications for the next cycle outpaced available slots within hours, including several from former military, officers seeking career changes. The administrative offices quietly retired their emergency response protocols, all except one. A single alarm remained active, its description unchanged from the original installation centuries prior. When all else fails, get a human. Nobody could remember why it was there, but maintenance logs showed someone had been testing it weekly since Digger's first infrastructure project. Just in case. Somewhere underneath it all, the Deathstalker's vibrational hum resonated through newly stabilized foundations, his fractal-bladed mouthparts carefully aligning another load-bearing crystal matrix. Students followed behind, their own smaller tools echoing his precision, some with claws, some with energy manipulators, some with perfectly ordinary human hands. All learning the same lesson, written nowhere in any official curriculum, but understood. Nonetheless, sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy isn't a monster. It's certainty. Jake never claimed humans were special. That's the first thing he'd tell you if you asked why he petted what the galaxy called a Deathstalker. He'd shrug, maybe take another sip of whatever questionable beverage the alien vending machines dispensed that day and say something like, "We had wolves." Not an explanation. Not even a good one. But the key to understanding why humanity's recklessness isn't actually recklessness at all. You see, Earth's evolutionary path forced humans to become professional behavior interpreters. Early humans didn't dominate their predators through brute strength or natural armor. They watched, learned patterns, recognized the difference between a territorial display and actual aggression long before they invented writing, a wolf's ear position, a bear's weight shift. These were survival tests humanity's ancestors passed for millennia. That's why Jake saw what the galaxy missed. Where others observed random violence in Digger's movements, he recognized purpose. The Deathstalker wasn't lashing out. It was responding to centuries of trigger-happy first contact protocols with increasingly distressed professional frustration. Human children demonstrate this daily without realizing it. Watch a toddler approach an unfamiliar dog. The smart ones don't just recoil or charge blindly. They pause, make eye contact, offer a tentative hand to sniff. The exact sequence, incidentally, that Jake used with Digger, not because he'd studied alien psychology, but because that's what you do when meeting anything that might bite. The galaxy's academics call it Martinez intuition in their papers. Jake calls it not being an idiot around strange animals. Humans may be the only species where stupid, brave, and situationally aware aren't mutually exclusive traits. Consider the historical record. Humans, upon discovering lions, didn't domesticate them out of fear. They noticed lion social structures resembled their own, saw opportunities for collaboration. Same with wolves, horses, even notoriously temperamental species like honey badgers. The approach always followed the same three-beat rhythm: observe need, provide alternative, establish reciprocity. Digger's case proved no different. The infamous, unstoppable aggression turned out to be a construction worker's frustration with everyone ruining his job site. Those lethal ambushes, emergency digging operations during wartime bombardments, the purring resonance that once triggered planetary evacuations, standard worksite communication frequencies. Here's the thing about growing up on a planet where everything from the weather to the wildlife could kill you. It teaches pragmatic optimism. Humans assume threats can be negotiated with until proven otherwise. Not because they're naive, but because the alternative is exhausting. This drives more cautious species insane. Professor Crickstall once demanded Jake explain his thought process during that first class. His answer didn't make the official reports. Look, if something's gonna kill you, it'll do it whether you panic or not, so might as well try talking first. This same logic explains why humans will pet literally anything that doesn't immediately remove their hand. The classroom's collective shudder makes the air recyclers hiccup. Meanwhile, Jake has pulled out what appears to be a literal paper notebook, an eccentricity that fascinates the Deathstalker more than the military briefing. The creature's multifaceted eyes track the motion of Jake's pen as he sketches rapid diagrams. Professor Crickstall misses this detail because she's busy reciting the containment protocols. Primary field operates at 12,000 megavolts, she announces. A display beside the tank shows a rotating model of the Deathstalker's anatomy with flashing red threat zones. The harmonic dampeners prevent it from achieving resonance. And this, she taps a small glowing orb at the top of the enclosure, is a Class Omega psychic inhibitor, just in case it tries to mentally dominate anyone within 500 meters. Jake flips a page in his notebook. The sound makes the Deathstalker's antennae twitch. "Professor," he says without looking up, "has anyone ever tried projecting non-threatening images at it? Like landscapes or whatever passes for cartoons in its culture?" Zephyr makes a tiny, despairing bubble pop noise. Grunk's combat hormone levels spike so sharply that the bioscanner above his seat starts beeping. Professor Crickstall's thermal vents cycle through 3 different warning colors before settling on barely restrained fury. Cadet Martinez. That creature once ate through an armored battalion like they were festival snacks. Its last recorded meal was the entire command staff of 2 warring factions during ceasefire negotiations. What part of this suggests it wants to watch interstellar cartoons? The Deathstalker's limbs shift again. Not the explosive movement everyone anticipated, but a curious repositioning that brings its front sensory cluster closer to the glass. Its fractal blade mouthparts make a soft clicking noise. Jake closes his notebook with deliberate slowness. The creature goes still, watching. "What if?" Jake says, pitching his voice lower like he's talking to a jumpy stray dog. Nobody's ever given it the chance to be anything but a weapon. The question lands like a live grenade in the silence. Several students develop spontaneous respiratory issues. Professor Crickstall's neural whiskers stiffen in what xenopsychologists call acute professional dissonance. The Deathstalker chooses this moment to press one bladed limb against the containment field, not attacking, just making contact. The energy barrier ripples where claws that could slice through titanium touch it with the delicacy of someone testing bathwater. Fizz finally crackles back into sentient form. It's not trying to break out? Jake stands slowly, keeping his movements telegraphic. The Deathstalker mirrors him, unfolding to its full height, a nightmare silhouette that would send most species into fight or flight. Except it's not adopting a combat stance. It's tracking Jake's motions with the focus of a chess player, anticipating an interesting gambit. Professor Crickstall's emergency protocol short-circuit when Jake steps toward the containment field instead of away. 12 separate alarms decide not to activate. The Deathstalker's bioluminescent nodes pulse faintly along its undercarriage, a phenomenon previously only observed right before mass casualty events. Watch its mouthparts, Jake murmurs, hands raised in what humans call the universal, I come, in peace, gesture. The Deathstalker's fractal blades retract slightly, its frontal limbs lower from defensive positioning. Grunk makes a sound like a malfunctioning trash compactor. The historical records show it does that right before. Jake takes another step. The Deathstalker doesn't eviscerate him. It tilts its enormous head, studying the human with what future textbooks will call first confirmed instance of academic curiosity in the species. The moment stretches like event horizon spaghetti. The only sound is the Deathstalker's respiratory vents cycling air and Fizz quietly reciting their species' death rites. Then Jake, either the bravest or stupidest organism in 5 parsecs, says the words that rewrite xenozoology. What if it's just really bad at making friends, Professor Ree? Crickstall's neural whiskers go limp. The containment field flickers as the Deathstalker emits a vibrational pattern that scrambles the suppression systems. Somewhere in the administrative wing, Dean Vorak's emergency alert panel lights up with 37 simultaneous warnings. From the advanced xenobiology lab, he sighs and starts drafting the inevitable incident report. Meanwhile, Jake's reaching toward the containment field again, this time holding out his notebook with a rough sketch of, is that a stick-figure Deathstalker playing fetch? The creature makes a noise that military analysts will later spend years arguing about. Some insist it's a pre-attack vocalization. Others claim it sounded suspiciously like laughter. Professor Crickstall finally finds her voice. Cadet. That creature's combat capabilities. Jake doesn't break eye contact with the Deathstalker. Devastating, yeah, but look at its feet. He points at the creature's lower appendages, not the killing claws everyone focuses on, but the blunt calloused pads beneath. Those aren't for slashing, they're for digging, and see how the claws angle inward? The Deathstalker obligingly lifts one limb, as if proud. The containment field hums at a frequency designed to trigger instinctive dread in 93% of known species. Jake Martinez steps through it like it's a department store security scanner. His sneakers squeak against the antiseptic floor. Behind him, Professor Crickstall's emergency vocal sac inflates to 3 times its normal size. A biological alarm system evolved to warn entire ecosystems of impending doom. Martinez. Her voice cracks the audio dampeners. That creature once digested a platoon of mechanized infantry in 11 minutes flat. Jake's already within arm's reach of the Deathstalker's containment bubble. The safety manual, the one with 14 chapters on approved extinction event procedures, specifically prohibits this proximity without at least 3 layers of powered armor. He's wearing a Ramones t-shirt with ketchup stains. The Deathstalker's main ocular cluster locks onto Jake. Each individual facet reflects a slightly different angle of the human's face, until Jake looks like he's peering into a nightmarish hall of mirrors. Its foreclaws extend with a sound like scimitars being unsheathed. The tips leave micro-fractures in the containment field's optical plating. Grunk's carapace plates slam together, like castle gates. That's the posture. The military briefings say that's the last thing battalion leaders see before. Jake raises one hand, palm up. The universal gesture for, I mean no harm across exactly none of the Deathstalkers known habitats. His fingers don't even shake. A thin sheen of sweat glistens on his forehead, not from fear, but because the lab's climate controls are calibrated for Professor Crickstall's volcanic homeworld. The Deathstalker's chemoreceptors flare. Jake's pheromone, profile must be scrambling its threat assessment protocols. Human biochemistry doesn't produce the standard fear markers most predators key in on. The creature's mandibles flex. Then something unprecedented happens. It sniffs him. Not the lunging snap described in wartime accounts, but a deliberate, almost cautious investigation. One bladed limb hovers centimeters from Jake's wrist, tremoring, slightly as sensory pits analyze his sweat composition. The containment field crackles with conflicting alarms that can't decide whether this qualifies as an attack. Fizz condenses into a perfect mathematical curve, their species equivalent of covering their eyes. It's sampling him for weak points. Jake holds still as the Deathstalker's largest claw, the one that left the infamous plasma scorch scars on the battlecruiser Endless Maw, brushes against his sleeve. The fabric parts with a crisp tearing sound. Everyone stops breathing. The claw retracts. The Deathstalker makes a low-frequency vibration that resonates in everyone's sternums. Professor Crickstall's emergency glands immediately secrete enough, neutralizing compounds to tranquilize a herd of rampaging Graxian mammoths. Jake exhales through his nose. See? He's just being polite. The Deathstalker's limbs shift into a configuration never before documented. Instead of the textbook kill coil posture, it crouches. The terrifying fractal blades along its dorsal ridge flatten. Its massive body lowers until its primary ocular cluster aligns with Jake's face at exact eye level. A notification pings from the bioscanner. Subject heart rate dropping below combat thresholds, the AI announces with audible confusion. Stress hormones? At baseline. This technical unit suggests recalibration of sensors. Jake's fingers twitch. The Deathstalker's chemoreceptors track the micro-movement with unsettling precision. Decades of military research insisted these creatures interpret such motions as pre-attack tremors. Yet instead of eviscerating him, it goes preternaturally. Still, Professor Crickstall's third set of arms are all typing emergency override codes simultaneously. Martinez, if you value your continued existence, do not. Galactic historians missed this because they studied humans in isolation. Saw the daring explorers, the reckless pioneers, the boundary-pushing scientists, all seemingly unafraid of consequences. What they failed to notice was the behavioral calculus behind each reckless act. Humans measure risk against curiosity with infuriating pragmatism. Case in point, when presented with the galaxy's most feared predator, Jake didn't see an existential threat. He saw an overgrown crab in distress. His species' history with crustaceans, from keeping hermit crabs as pets to inventing Old Bay seasoning, meant nothing about Digger triggered his primal fear responses. Just professional concern for what was clearly a distressed tradesman. This explains why humans thrive in interspecies relations where others falter. They're not just tolerant of chaos, they're selectively blind to it. A human will walk into a room vibrating with centuries of racial tension and ask, "So who wants pizza?" Not because they don't understand the stakes, but because they're running a different calculation entirely. Shared meals dissolve barriers faster than cautious diplomacy. The military minds studying Digger for weakness made one critical error. They assumed a creature capable of violence must primarily think about violence. Humans know better. Show them a warrior, and they'll ask what that warrior protects. Present them with a monster, and they'll wonder what made it monstrous. This isn't idealism. It's hard-won evolutionary strategy. Digger's responses prove the point. His species, it turns out, understands reciprocity better than anyone realized. For every gentle scratch Jake provided, the Deathstalker repaired another campus structural flaw. When Zephyr composed harmonic work songs, Digger taught precise mineral alignment techniques in return. The relationship wasn't taming. It was professional courtesy between fellow tradesmen. This pattern repeats wherever humans go. The infamous Tarkilian blood rites became collaborative healing ceremonies once someone recognized them as trauma responses. Zentarian war dances transformed into construction site safety coordination when set to different tempos. Even the Veln hierarchy's notorious silence rituals began yielding dialogue after a human orchestra composer noted their similarity to symphonic rests. None of this surprised Jake. Humans have spent their entire existence negotiating with the inscrutable. Hurricanes, viruses, unpredictable predators. Earth offered no quarter, so humans learned to read between nature's lines. The galaxy's terrifying unknowns, just registered as Tuesday. That's the secret behind humanity's diplomatic successes. They're not fearless. They're professionally intimate with fear, which allows them to bypass it when useful. While other species evolved armor or venom, humans honed a different survival tool. The ability to look at something terrifying and ask, but what does it want? The answer, more often than not, is startlingly simple. Digger wanted respect for his craftsmanship. Tarkilians needed acknowledgement of historical wounds. Zentarians craved constructive outlets for their precision instincts. Humans merely provided what Earth taught them to offer all potentially dangerous things, a fair chance before judgment. Dean Vorak once asked Jake if this approach ever backfires. The human just laughed. Constantly, but back home we have a saying, if you're not occasionally getting bitten, you're not trying to understand anything worthwhile. Digger, overhearing this, rumbled approvingly and went back to reinforcing the dean's unstable bookshelves. Mutual understanding, it turns out, requires accepting occasional scratches. The galaxy calls it a revolutionary diplomatic strategy. Humans call it common sense. Both might be right. And the lesson? Simple. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask, "Can I pet it?" before assuming it wants to eat you, especially if it turns out to be an overworked civil engineer with poor PR. Galactic University's deadliest classroom now holds the record for highest enrollment. Professor Crickstall lectures beside a reformed Deathstalker who grades papers with terrifying precision. Where students once feared extinction, they now line up for office hours with Digger, their structural engineering TA who purrs during consultations. The university archived its emergency protocols under historical curiosities. That ominous containment unit became Digger's project storage. Even Dean Vorak keeps nutrient bricks in his desk just in case. Somewhere on Earth, a child pets an unfamiliar dog. On a distant colony, explorers extend cautious hands to strange creatures. The method remains unchanged. Sometimes the bravest question isn't complex, just, "Can I pet it?" Sometimes the answer reshapes worlds.